I guess this part of the podcast is aimed towards younger blues players and younger guitarists who, absolutely love it and get right into it and, go jamming and enjoy, playing guitar, all that kind of stuff. Now, it's a pretty loaded subject, but this is just how I see it as someone who's in their 30s. I guess I never really started as a young kid, but I was young enough. I was in my late teens when I first started really playing. And by 2002, I was starting to gig. So I really thought I had pretty high expectations that if you do something that you love a lot, then, you'll reap rewards of it. And that is true in a lot of cases. And that's the way you should look at things as well. You put a lot of hard work in and things come back. And I think, without boasting, my YouTube channel is, an example of that. I started it off just for something to do. Several years ago, I decided to take it a little more seriously and buy better cameras and lighting and backdrops, all that kind of stuff, and better microphones and all of that stuff, and start the podcast and, really develop the community. And if you put all the time and effort in, then, you can make something happen. But I think one of the problems when you're young is you don't see the bigger picture until a little later on in life. And one of the things I've noticed with friends of my age group and older, say 5 years older to 5 years younger, so say 40 to 30, they were so focused on music that they never really developed anything else outside of that. They never really thought about, they'd work wherever they wanted or wherever they could, I should say, to support the music habit, which is fine, but you end up doing a lot of jobs that you don't like. It dawned on me pretty early on that, I shouldn't say pretty early on, but maybe 8 years ago, that if I'm really gonna enjoy my music to places that I'm happy with it and enjoy it in a way where I don't feel burdened by just being a musician, that I needed some other options. So for me, I'm a qualified IT guy. I went and got some certificates. I'm a Microsoft specialist. I did that for a number of years, and I can fall back to that if I need to. It's not as fun as playing music, but you don't have the same sort of. I guess what I'm trying to say is I've got that option. If I took gigging seriously, I wouldn't be making videos as often as I do. So for me, music is something that I love to do, and I'll do it whenever I can. But it doesn't consume me, both intellectually or physically. It's not the only thing that I think of day in and day out. I have other things that I love to do. I have the computer stuff that I love. I game as well. You might not believe that, but I might sit on the Xbox for a while or play some Counter-Strike or whatever. I love doing videos. I love audio stuff. I love recording. All that stuff's fantastic. I love gigging, but it seems like there's certain communities in Melbourne that are pushing kids to gig already and get right into it, and everybody keeps telling them how good they are at a really young age, which I find that could actually be destructive to them, in the next 5 or 7 or 8 years. I think if you keep telling, kids they're great, even when they're clearly beginning at music, they might be getting better quickly because they're young, but they're still not, they're still not great. But a lot of these people keep telling them that, which basically, if they get to a point where they're 25 or 30 and they're not breaking out of the local scene, or they're not doing things that meet their own expectations, they're going to start to get jaded. Now, I've seen this with a number of my friends or people that I've known in the scene, I should say, for a number of years, where all they did was music. They worked friggin', no offense, like dead-end jobs just to sort of get financially able. And I think eventually that, people are going to get sick of doing that. I know when I was doing music and I was gigging a lot, I'd work wherever I could just to do the gig on the weekend or the Friday and Saturday night or whatever. But it doesn't really leave you with a lot of, I guess fulfillment isn't the word, but maybe it is. You just definitely need to grow in other areas and also have a fallback plan that's not, doing the job that you did when you first started working, because that's all you've ever done. I think you really need to grow both musically to keep yourself satisfied, and you need to grow in other areas. Computers is a huge part of my life, and I think YouTube ended up being something that I love because I love computers. I love using video cameras, always have. I'm an audio guy, I've done engineering, all that stuff. So it kind of was like an accumulation of all these skills. If you're a non-technical guy and you're a musician, you're almost at a disadvantage now. So if you are a muso, I think tech and musicians kind of go hand in hand these days, whether or not it's, you know how to make websites, whether or not you know how to record bands or your own band with, things that you've got, like, you can use Pro Tools or whatever, all this sort of stuff. It's kind of like a interweb now where things that you don't think about are also extremely relevant to your music, whether or not you can use Photoshop, all this kind of thing. Well, these are skills you should be learning. If you're just doing music now and that's what you're focused on, you need to learn all this other stuff. Otherwise, you're at a huge disadvantage, or you have to keep paying other people to do everything for you. Now, I learned how to do a lot of other stuff for myself to benefit myself. Well, I wasn't a huge Photoshop guy, but I spent time learning how to use it to make my album covers, all the thumbnails for YouTube, all of the kind of things that I use it for. I use it daily. I use it absolutely every day. I use Photoshop now, whereas when I was just doing music, I didn't really spend any time learning how to use it properly. Now I can make posters for my band. I can, all this kind of thing. So that's just one example of how tech integrates with music. And if you have that skill, you're also employable. You don't just have to go back to, working in a shop, like a music shop. And I don't want to be disrespectful, because lots of great musicians work in music shops, but that's the default for a lot of people. They'll take their skills, they'll work in a shop, or say they might go into telemarketing or something, because that's a job you don't need any kind of skills for, next to no skills, even though you do need some English skills and all that. So I don't want to be disrespectful to people that do that either. I'm just saying that I've seen guys that have done that when they've left school to do music, and 10 or 15 years later, they're still doing those kind of jobs, 2 weeks here and there, 3 weeks here and there. And I don't know, I would be really, really frustrated not having a fallback plan. If YouTube closes down, or if my shop dries up or whatever, I know I'm employable to some extent through other companies, because now I have knowledge in social networking and video production, things that expanded my technical bag into the creative realm as well. As not only that, is into the networking realm. I've seen it work for myself. I have understanding of how to use all the advertising solutions for promotional tools and all that kind of thing as well. So there's a lot of things to learn, and I think if you if you don't have a guitar in your hand all day, you really need to start getting some different options to you available, or make more options available to you as well. So learn how to do things for yourself. Don't rely on other people. If you're a muso, these tools are essential. If you have a lot of time on your hands and you're not booked, do a course, do something else that you might be interested in. There's plenty that could keep you busy while still being somewhat relating to your goal in music as well. So it brings me to my point. I think if a lot of these kids keep getting told they're fantastic, they're probably going to lose sight of what they want to do when they grow up, so to speak. So, the scene itself in Melbourne, or where I live, or in Australia, is not fantastic. There's a handful of venues that actually pay blues bands in Melbourne, and there's obviously festivals and that, which would be pretty cool. But outside of that, there's just not a lot. So, to think that you're going to live comfortably touring all the time is almost it's a bit of a fallacy now in Melbourne especially, and it's a relatively expensive city. It's not as expensive as, say, Sydney, but I would hate to just rely on gig money, and any gigs I do now are like, a little bit of a benefit on top of, everything else that I've got going on right now. I had a chat to a friend of mine about this who was spot on, and he said, if you keep telling kids who are average that they're amazing, they're in for a big letdown eventually. And I think, Obviously, they got room to improve, so don't get me wrong there. I do wish them well, but yeah, I've seen this happen with people who took it a lot more seriously than I did. I did it for fun on the weekends, and I love recording and having things in my hand that I've done. That's kind of what I kind of work towards. A lot of people just rehashing the same songs, in a way that, I don't know, it's just bringing nothing new to it. And I would hate to see these kids 7 or 8 years from now working in the same part-time job, playing in the same few venues, unless that's their dream. I don't know. I think they're in for a bit of a shock. Anyway, let me know what you think. This is just, some thoughts of mine about the subject of telling kids that they're way better than they are a lot. I think it actually causes problems. So yeah, I guess my only advice is from someone in that sort of middle age group. I'm not 40 and I'm not 30 now, so right in the middle. I think that my suggestion would be always have a fallback plan of some type, because it's a really handy thing to have. And I would also concentrate on growing, in here and in other ways than just musically.